During a cold, rainy night shift at the hospital, a black nurse discovers a dying Marine with no ID despite being underrepresented. To intervene, she risks everything to save him. What she didn't know the man saved is the president's son. Her act of courage costs her the job, but 4 hours later, an invitation from the White House arrives and her life is about to change forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thought. The air in the Nia at Southside General Hospital was too still for a Friday night in Atlanta. Outside, the city was drenched. Rain lashed against the tall windows like impatient fingers inside the harsh, fluorescent lights. Medivirion looked a little more tired, a little more pale. Machines beeped in rhythm. The front desk smelled like coffee that had been reheated one too many times. In the background, a janitor slowly pushed his mob past the vending machine, humming low off-key. Nurses moved through the hallway, some charting, some chatting in murmurs. The place was quiet, but not calm. It was the kind of silence that made people glance over their shoulders. Nia Bennett stood behind the triage counter, sipping stale coffee from a chipped mug that said "Nurses call the shots." Her dark brown scrubs hugged her frame after a long shift. Her skin was a rich, deep brown, her features sharp but composed, and her thick black hair was pulled back into a low braid that was beginning to loosen. She had been on her feet since early evening and her knees ached, but her mind was sharper than ever. She wasn't someone who got careless. At 27, Nia had seen too much to be shaken easily. Broken bones, overdoses, street violence, scared teenagers, grieving mothers. But tonight felt strange. Too quiet, no yelling, no new admits. For almost 40 minutes she glanced up at the clock, 12:23 a.m., and exhaled slow and measured. Across from her, a younger nurse named Alicia tapped on a keyboard, ice red rimmed from fatigue. An older tech named Manny was adjusting 4 racks with practiced robotic hands behind them. Dr. Cohen leaned against a wall, flipping through a clipboard, sipping a protein shake like it was water. Everyone looked like they were waiting for something to happen, but hoping it wouldn't, and then it did. The double doors at the end of the EI burst open with a deafening crash that made everyone flinch. Rain slammed in with Thuan. 2 paramedics stormed through, soaked from head to toe, their gloved hands gripping the rails of a gurney. Ethid flew past the nurses' station, code red, incoming. One of them shouted, Malamid 20s. No ID found near the shipping docks. Chest trauma, shrapnel suspected. P crashing. No phone, no tags, no coms. People froze. Nurses looked to each other. Doctors exchanged glances. Nia was already moving. The man on Fegurney was a mess of blood, mud, and ripped fabric. His face was swollen, a gash splitting his cheekbone. His shirt was almost shredded. One combat boot hung loose, the other missing entirely. But what made Nia's breath catch wasn't the blood, it was the dull glint of metal on his chest. Dog tag caked in grime. She reached out and turned it over gently with 2 fingers. J. Miles, she read quietly, United States Marine Corps. Behind her supervisor, Cotton's voice rang out low and sharp, do not touch him. Nia turned. Caton was already walking, in clipboard in hand, his usual frown deeper than usual. He was in his early 50s, always crisp, always watching, the type who loved policy more than people. He's military, he said flatly. No ID, no orders, no clearance. We don't have jurisdiction. Don't lay another hand on him until we're authorized. He's dying. Nia said louder than she intended. Her voice echoed just enough to draw more eyes. Manny stopped midst a Palisha. Blinked. Dr. Cohen looked up. Caton didn't flinch. If he's federal, touching him without clearance is a breach. You know that I also know he'll be dead in minutes if we stand here quoting policy. We're not cleared to make that call. Nurse Bennett. Nia's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the rage climbing her throat, but she kept her tone even. What do you want me to do? Watch him die because we're scared of paperwork? Stand down, Caton said again, his voice harder now. I'll call command until they respond. You wait. The man on the gurney let out a soft groan, barely audible. The monitor beeped, then dipped. BP 70 and falling. Pulsiox 81 and dropping. Niasterdat. The Marine, his chest barely rose. Blood soaked the stretcher beneath him. Then she made her choice. She turned it back to the team. Plasma O2 suture kit now. For a split second, Nobody moved, and Alicia grabbed a tray and followed Dr. Cohen, hesitated then. Join them, Manny rushed to open trauma room 2. You're making a mistake. Caton called out, but it was distant now. Nia didn't respond. She followed the gurney into the trauma room, her gloves already on her mind, narrowing to one goal: keep him alive. The door shut behind her. The rest of the hospital went silent. The rain had stopped, but the gray morning sky still pressed down on Atlanta like a held breath. Inside Southside General, the hall smelled of old coffee and disinfectants moved quietly. Eyes low, steps careful. It was the shift change lull imminent between exhaustion and urgency, where the silence said more than anyone wanted to admit. Nia sat alone on the bench outside the admin wing, her scrubs wrinkled, her badge limp against her chest. She held a paper cup of vending machine coffee, but hadn't taken a cipher, fingers wrapped around it, just to feel the warmth. Her mind hadn't stopped running since the trauma room door slammed shut 4 hours ago. She had saved his life. She knew that she had done what they all were supposed to do, but the looks she'd gotten since the whispers, the averted eyes, the tension every time she walked past another nurse station told her something was coming, and not something good. The intercom clicked. Nurse Bennett, please report to the administrator's office. The voice was flat, rehearsed, not a request, not a conversation, just a summons. Nia stood slowly, knees stiff from sitting too long. She smoothed the front of her scrub top with one hand, then walked down the corridor. As she passed the e-nurse station, Alicia looked up briefly, then looked away. Manny was restocking Eve trays, pretending not to see her. Even Dr. Cohen, who had stepped in with her that night, offered only a quiet nod without eye contact. The hallway leading to administration was quieter than the rest of the hospital. Walls were lined with framed awards, donor plaques, mission statements in fancy fonts. It felt disconnected from the lives behind the trauma bay doors, like it belonged to a different kind of building, a cleaner, a safer one that the office door was open when she arrived. Inside said Helen Dryden, chief administrator, wearing a burgundy blazer over a white blouse, hairpin neatly, expression unreadable across from her was Anthony Yates, the hospital's legal counsel, gray suit, thin glasses, a man who rarely looked up from whatever document he was holding. Come in, Helen said. Her tone was cool, professional, no smile. Close the door, please. Nia stepped inside, closed the door behind her, and stood still. Helen gestured to the chair. Have a seat. She sat, her heart beat steady but hard, not panic, just a rising wall inside her chest, pressing in. You know why you're here? Helen began. I assume, Nia said, keeping her voice even. It's about last night. Helen nodded. She folded her hands over a folder on her desk. Nurse Bennett, what you did in trauma 2 was in some ways admirable. You saved a patient's life. No one's disputing that. Yates adjusted his glasses but didn't speak. Helen continued, but in doing so you violated federal policy. You intervened in a classified situation without proper clearance. You acted against direct instruction from your supervisor. Nia blinked once. I acted because no one else would. I had a dying man on my table, and I did what I'm trained to do. We're not questioning your intention. Yates said finally, his voice soft but cold. We're outlining the legal exposure you created for this institution. Nia's jaw tensed. Exposure, she repeated, almost a whisper. Is that what we're calling it now? Nia, Helen said, voice slightly firmer. You're an excellent nurse. No one here questions your skill, but we operate in a system, and when the system is bypassed, we all suffer the consequences except the patient. Nia replied, he lived. That doesn't change the liability. Yates said. Nia looked at Helen. So what is this, a warning, a formal write-up? Helen's eyes flicked to Yates, then back to Nia. No, she said, it's termination. Effective immediately. The room went still for a long moment. Nia didn't move. The only sound was the low ticking of the wall clock behind Helen's head. Tick, tick, you're firing me. Nia said, voice flat. We're ending your employment due to insubordination and policy violation, Helen clarified. Nia leaned back slowly. After 5 years, after everything I've done for this hospital. Helen's voice stayed professional. We understand this is difficult, and we're prepared to offer a severance package and a positive reference. As long as there's no challenge to the terms you think I care about a reference, Nia asked. Quietly, y'all think that's why I went into that trauma room. Helen didn't answer Yates. Way's already pulling papers from a file. I saved a man's life, Nia said again. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, because it was right, and because everyone else in that room looked away. She stood slowly. The chair creaked. As he pushed it back, her hands were clenched now, not shaking, just tight. You'll get my badge and keys by the end of the day, she said. Helen nodded. Thank you, Nurse Bennett. Nia didn't say anything more. She opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the silence following her like a shadow back at the locker room. She opened her cubby with numb fingers. Her name tag, Nia Bennett, RN, sat on the shelf. Mocking her now, she removed her stethoscope, a penlight, and a folded photo of her mother from the top corner. Around her, no one spoke. Two nurses were changing into their day scrubs, avoiding her eyes. One muttered something under her breath, but Nia didn't ask. She zipped her bag, tucked badge into her front pocket, and walked out of the hospital without looking back. The automatic doors hissed open. The outside air was damp, and still the sun had started to rise behind thick clouds, casting a muted yellow glow across the wet parking lot. She stood for a moment on the curb, arms crossed over her chest, her breath visible in the cool air. A few cars passed by. A man walked his dog across the street. The city was waking up, but for Nia, the world felt quiet in a different way. All I did was save a life, she thought. That's it. Finch turned, lifted her chin, and walked away. The apartment was small but warm, nestled in a weathered brick building off Monroe Avenue in southeast Atlanta. The wallpaper peeled in a few corners and the floor creaked under certain tiles, but Nia had made it hers. Family photos lined the hallway wall, her mother in her nurse's uniform, her brother in high school graduation robes, her father in military dress. Blues from a life for illness, a quiet pride lived in every frame. But today, the place wasn't. The only sound came from the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint tick of the kitchen cloth. Nia sat at the table in an oversized sweatshirt and flannel pants, hair pulled into a loose bun. Her phone was face down beside an untouched bowl of cereal. Her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep. She hadn't turned on the television. She hadn't called anyone. She had spent the morning sitting in the same spot, staring out the window, watching the rain dry on the sidewalk. In her hand, she held a small piece of cold metal, the dog tag. She hadn't meant to take it in the chouse after surgery. After they moved the Marine into recovery, it had come off in her glove. Somehow it ended up in her scrub pocket, and when she was escorted out that morning, she didn't think to return it. Now she couldn't stop looking at it. The name was simple, the letters barely visible under the grime. J. Mellis. Edges were smooth, but worn. It weighed more than it should have, as if it carried the weight of what had happened, what she had done, what they had done to her. A knock broke the stillness. It was sharp, not the kind of knock that came from neighbors or delivery drivers, not a friendly tap. It was direct, timed, and practiced. Nia stood slowly, heart thumping. She crossed the room, peeked through the peephole, and froze. There were three men outside. All wore dark suits, black ties, and earpieces. The man in the center stood with perfect posture, his hands clasped in front of him. His expression didn't shift, not even when she shifted behind the door. Nia hesitated, then unlocked the chain and opened the door. "To in Miss Nia Bennett?" the man asked. His voice was event-controlled. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm Agent Ward, United States Secret Service. May we come in?" Nia's stomach dropped. "Secret Service?" Her voice cracked slightly. "What's going on?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details here, ma'am, but you've been formally requested at the White House. The president would like to speak with you." Nia blinked, speechless, looked down at herself, sweatshirt stained with coffee socks. "Mismatch at this. This has to be a mistake." "It's not," Ward replied, unmoving. "We're prepared to escort you now. You'll have time to change in the vehicle if you need." A silence stretched between them. The words didn't make sense. Less than 24 hours ago, she was being told to turn in her badge. She was being summoned by the most powerful man in the country. Nothing about this felt real. "I need a minute," Tesh said. Ward gave a slight nod. "We'll wait." Nia closed the door, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. Her hands shook slightly as she moved to her bedroom. She pulled on a pair of dark jeans, and a clean button-up blouse tied her hair back into a tighter bun, then grabbed her small purse before she left. She glanced once more at the dog tag still on the kitchen table. She hesitated, then picked it up, slipped it into her pocket, and exhaled. When she stepped outside, the entire block had changed. A line of black SUVs stretched down the street. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Eamon, walking his dog, froze mid-step. A little girl on the stoop across the street waved wide-eyed. Moment Nia stepped through the building's front gate. The agents moved into formation, one opening the car door for her, the other scanning the street inside the SUV. The interior was silent and spotless. The seats were firm leather, the windows darkened to near pitch black. A bottle of water sat unopened in the cup holder. The vehicle pulled away without a word, blending into the procession. As the convoy rolled smoothly through the city, Nia sat stiffly, arms crossed. She stared at the back of Agent Ward's head in the front seat. "Can you tell me why?" she asked finally. Ward didn't turn. "You'll be briefed on arrival." She leaned back. "Am I in trouble?" "No, ma'am," he said. "You're under investigation." That answer should have calmed her. It didn't. As they left the residential blocks and entered the downtown corridor, Nia's heart refused to slow. The Marine's name echoed in her head. J. Miles. He was alive. She knew that much. But who is he? Why had this reached the White House? They moved on to the freeway, traffic parting easily as the convoy passed from above. A military helicopter buzzed in the sky. It all felt too much, too orchestrated. 30 minutes past 10th Capitol appeared. The White House was just as it looked in the textbooks, massive, elegant, intimidating, but standing before it in real time, it felt different, alive, weighted with something bigger than pride. Nia's palms were sweating by the time the SUV rolled to a stop at the northwest entrance. The door opened. A staffer in a navy blue suit stood waiting, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Bennett, this way, please." Nia stepped out, legs slightly shaky. She followed the staffer through security checkpoints, past marble halls lined with portraits, past aides and guards who moved with purpose. No one told her what to expect. No one explained. They stopped in front of a set of large double doors. The aide turned to her. "He's waiting for you inside." Then he opened the doors and stepped aside. Nia took one breath and walked in. The room was brighter than she expected. Sunlight poured in through tall-arched windows, casting golden patches on the marble floor. The walls were lined with shelves holding thick books with gold lettering, flags draped behind the desk, and two large oil paintings hung one other side, both former presidents, and there, near the Resolute Desk, stood the man she had seen on television countless times, the President of the United States. Turned as the doors closed behind her. "Nia Bennett," he said, his voice low but steady, "thank you for coming." Nia stood frozen just inside the doorway, unsure whether to salute, nod, speak, or even breathe. She started, then coughed herself. "Yes, sir, thank you for having me." He offered a faint smile and gestured to the seat across from him. "Please." She walked forward slowly, her heart pounding so loud it filled her ears. She sat carefully, her hands folded tight in her lap. The chair felt too soft, too formal. She kept her back straight and her chin up, but inside everything swirled confusion, fear, awe. The president didn't sit. He walked slowly behind the desk, then stopped and turned toward her. His expression was somber, not political, not polished, just personal. "You saved my son's life," he said. Nia blinked. Her voice caught. "I didn't know I know you." "Didn't?" he said, nodding. "You had no idea who he was? That's what makes what you did more remarkable. You didn't save a Marine because he was my son. You saved a dying young man because it was the right thing to do, because others hesitated and you didn't." She lowered her eyes, the weight of his words settling heavy on her shoulders. "I didn't act for credit," she said quietly. "I acted because no one else would." He stepped closer, resting both hands on the edge of the desk. "We reviewed the footage, heard from the team, watched how you took command when the room froze. They told me how you kept him alive, how you pulled him back when the monitors went flat." He paused. "You went against policy, you broke the chain of command, you risked your job, but in that moment, you did what even experienced doctors didn't. You saw past rules, past the fear, and made a human decision, and for that my family will always be in your debt." Nia looked up, her throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. The door behind her opened again and soft footsteps approached. She turned to see the First Lady enter, elegant, poised, wearing a tailored navy dress, but her eyes were glassy, rimmed with emotion. Without hesitation, she crossed the room and pulled Nia into a gentle hug. "You didn't just save a Marine," she whispered, voice breaking. "You gave us back our child." Nia froze, then slowly returned the embrace. She felt the tremble in the woman's hands. The raw human grief that had lingered in the hours before they knew their son would live. When the First Lady stepped back, her voice steadied. "We had prepared ourselves for the worst. His unit was ambushed, communications were lost, and then we were told someone had found him a nurse, an off-duty nurse, who wouldn't give up. That was you." Neil tried to speak, but nothing came. The president walked toward her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And now we'd like to do more than just say thank you." Another door opened. Staff members entered quietly, followed by a photographer and two members of the press, cameras in hand, but respectful in distance. A military aide stepped in last, holding a small polished velvet box. Nia straightened instinctively, unsure what to do. A podium was rolled forward. The president stood behind it, clearing his throat as an aide unfurled a document with the presidential seal beside him. "For acts of extraordinary bravery," he began, "for placing humanity above a protocol, for saving a United States Marine under conditions where seconds mattered and hesitation could have been fatal, it is my distinct honor to award the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Nurse Nia Bennett." Gasps echoed through the room. Flashbulbs flickered. Nia froze, her hands clenched against her legs. She looked at the First Lady, who nodded gently. "You deserve this." The military aide stepped forward. The president opened the box and lifted the medal, its blue ribbon catching the light, the golden star radiant against the velvet. "Please rise," he said. Nia stood slowly, her knees trembling. He stepped toward her and placed the medal around her neck. The weight of it settled just below her collarbone. It was heavier than it looked. The room broke into applause. The president leaned close. "This isn't just a medal," he said. "It's the country saying, we see you." She managed to smile, one that came with tears, not tears of shame, not exhaustion, but release. When the applause settled, he lifted his hand again. "One more thing," he said, voice full but calm. "This administration believes in investing in those who lead with heart. As of today, Nurse Nia Bennett has been appointed head nurse of the White House Medical Unit." The cameras erupted again. Reporters leaned forward. Staff whispered. Nia's mouth opened slightly. I'm not even employed right now." "You are now," he said with a grin. The First Lady stepped beside her. "You'll have housing nearby, full salary, your choice of staff, and a very resource. You need to do what you do best." Nia blinked. "I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," the First Lady said gently. "Just take it in. You earn it, every part of this." Nia touched the medal lightly. It was still warm from his hand. She looked around the room. She thought of that cold air, the gurney soaked in blood, the silence when no one would move. She thought of the dog tag in her pocket, decision she made not knowing who he was, and now she stood under the seal off the president, no longer dismissed, no longer invisible, not just seen, respected, and maybe finally at peace. Weeks had passed since that day in the White House. The headlines had faded, the cameras moved on, but for Nia Bennett, life had not returned to normal. It had shifted into something entirely new. The White House Medical Unit was nothing like the EIA at Southside General. Fuels were quieter, the protocols stricter, the patients more polished. Senators with migraines, foreign diplomats with stomach bugs, security staff with pulled muscles after training drills. Everything was pristinely controlled, and yet in many ways more distant than the fear chaos she had come from. Still, she adjusted her badge now, read Nia Bennett, RN, Director of Medical Services. Her name was stitched into her new uniform in white thread below the White House seal. Her office sat just 2 doors down from the Vice President's suite. The first time she walked into it alone, she stood still for nearly a full minute. The door closed behind her, just breathing. It smelled like fresh paint and new leather. The desk gleamed on the shelf behind her. They had already framed a photo from the medal ceremony, but her eyes were drawn to what sat on the corner of the desk. J. Miles' dog tag. She hadn't let it go. She had offered it back once. Leon Jackson, the young Marine she saved, had smiled at her gently and said, "Keep it. It reminds me we both made it." She never argued again. One afternoon, as she was organizing a training protocol for medical response teams, there was a soft knock on her open door. She looked up, and there he was. Leon stood tall, fully recovered in his formal dress blues. He looked healthier than the day he whispered, "Thank you." But his eyes still held the same depth. He stepped inside slowly, his movement no longer stiff, though there was still a faint limp in his left leg. "Permission to enter?" he asked, grinning. Nia stood from her desk. "You never need to ask." He walked and glanced around the room, took it in. "So this is what saving someone gets you?" She raised an eyebrow. "It wasn't about that." He nodded. "I know that's why it matters." He reached into his pocket and held out something wrapped in cloth. She took it gently and unwrapped it. "To reveal a medal, not Hirsch's. The Navy gave me this," he said. "Medal for heroism not involving actual conflict. But truth is, I wouldn't be around to accept it if not for you. Sound official or not, it's yours." Nia looked at it, then at him. Her voice was quite low. "Breathing is all the thanks I need." He smiled still. "I wanted you to have it." They sat for a moment in comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't demand conversation. Later, that evening after her shift, Nia found herself driving without thinking. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. Her hands turned fuel almost on their own. When she looked up, she was parked across the street from Southside General. The hospital looked the same, crowded, rushed, raw. She didn't know why she came. Maybe to remember, maybe to let go. She zipped her hoodie up, pulled a hood low over her head, and crossed the street quietly. Inside, the E hadn't changed. The same antiseptic smell, the same overworked staff, the same flickering light. Above triage desk number 2, she moved slowly, blending in. A young nurse, maybe 22, fumbled within 4 while a father panicked beside her, his child crying on the stretcher. The girl's hands were shaking, her voice trembling as she tried to reassure him. No one noticed. Everyone else was too busy. Nia moved forward, leaned in gently. "Slow down," she whispered. "Breathe. Lift the port first, not the line." The nurse looked up, startled. Nia gave her a small, steady nod. The nurse blinked, then did as instructed. It worked. The father exhaled, the child calmed. Nia stepped back quietly before Inian could ask her name. She walked out through the same doors she once pushed open every morning at 7 o'clock a.m. She hadn't looked back. The next day, Nia met with her lawyer and financial advisors, created a fund not under her name, no public press, no media splash. It was just a quiet scholarship built for young nursing students from underrepresented communities. Those who had the heart but not the money, those who needed someone to believe in them. She read every application herself. She wrote letters of acceptance by hand. One of them ended with the words, "Don't wait for permission, do what you were born to do." Months later, the White House hosted a new initiative, one designed to mentor the next generation of trauma nurses and medics. Nia helped build it. She helped recruit, design the curriculum, even selected the first cohort of candidates. In the morning of the launch ceremony, she stood off stage with a clipboard, watching rows of young people in pressed uniforms take their seats under the canopy set up on the south lawn. Some clutched notebooks, others looked around in awe. All of them reminded her of herself before the night, before the gurney, before the choice. The crowd stirred. Leon Jackson approached the podium in full dress. When he raised his hand in salute, Nia blinked. He wasn't saluting the flag, he was saluting her. "I asked to speak today," he began, "because I owe everything I am right now to a woman who broke the rules, who stood alone, hoked it while everyone else waited. She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't know who I was, and when the system punished her, she didn't back down." She wrote. He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "If you're lucky enough to learn under her, you're learning from someone who chose courage over comfort. That's the kind of leader I'd follow anywhere." The crowd rose in ovation. Reporters captured every word. But Nia didn't step up for attention. When the ceremony ended, shared into her clinic, hung her coat, and sat at her desk. The dog tag still sat in the corner untouched. She looked at it for a long time, then smiled. She had come full circle, not because She asked for it not because anyone handed it to her, but because she held on to the one thing that never changed who she was and now. World finally saw it too. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.